Hey there, Russ here. Welcome back to the shop. I got a question from a viewer, Stan, and he asked me about his shop vac. He has a Bauer 14-gallon shop vac. That's Harbor Freight sells that. If you want to know, if you just go in there, Bauer is the brand. But he asked me if he could use that on his miter saw. That in order to do that, he has to reduce it from 2.5 to 1.25 inches. And the question was whether or not that would impact the shop vac itself and cause it to overheat because you're reducing that amount of airflow. And I really brought up a good question in my head is you probably should understand when you look at your shop vac whether you can do that sort of thing or not. Can you cut that suction off completely and let its motor just wind at a real high speed? Is that going to hurt anything or not? And the point is that all electric motors have heat. They create heat, and you have to get that heat dissipated away from the motor. And almost any kind of motor you see will have some kind of heat ventilation on it, some kind of ventilation system. And when it is running, you can feel the air coming out of here. If you cover up the intake parts, no air will come out of here even though it's still running. That air is critical to keep that motor from overheating. Now on shop vacs in particular, that's creating already a wind tunnel, a vacuum on one side, pressure on the other for your inlet and outlet on your shop vac. Now on small vacuums like household vacuum cleaners and some inexpensive small shop vacs, they don't give you that separate chamber for air cooling of the motor. It is actually incorporated into the shop vac basic vacuum system, and the air, in other words, passes by that motor. That also to cool it is the same air that is being pushed out with after it's vacuuming, pulling in all that dirt. I myself think it's not a good way to do it, but a lot of household vacuum cleaners, that's the way they do it. So anyway, the thing is that you have to understand whether or not that shop vac that you have, does it have that separate air cooling chamber or not? Because if it does, when you cover up your shop vac hose and the motor goes up, you're not going to burn it up from doing that. It's not going to starve it, because that starvation of air is only on the propeller end of it, and it actually frees up the load. That's why the motor actually speeds up in RPMs. But the air is still flowing by the motor from that other chamber so that motor does not overheat. Now, there are issues about the idea, theoretically, of the motor running at higher RPMs and shortening the life or something. Yes, those things would apply. But as far as overheating it, which is an immediate problem, and if you have an overheating problem, it wouldn't take very long at all for that motor to go from working well to failing in its overheating. So, they want to make sure, most shop vacs, that you have that. If you have one in particular that you're going to be choking off that vacuum for one reason or another, just make sure it has a separate chamber for the air motor cooling. Even these things have that cooling. And I will tell you right now, just for a fact, I looked at mine, and the intake here on both sides was actually clogged with sawdust. I don't know how that happened, but that was weird. That's the intake. So the air coming out of here was highly restricted. I'm glad I noticed that and cleaned it. So if you have one of these, you might want to check those vents every now and then on those tools to make sure they stay clear. I think it somehow had some kind of wetness, I think. So the sawdust that was actually caking, almost like it had been sprayed with some WD-40 or silicone or something that got on here. So anyway, you might want to keep an eye on yours. Make sure those things don't clog up on you. Back to the shop vac, we do want to make sure that you have those vents. I do not own one of those, but I did take a good look at it. I watched a couple of reviews, and I see that the Bauer 14-gallon has those same vents on the upper body of the shop vac. So the part that when you lift it up off of the other part, that's where the regular vacuum is and the vacuum hoses hook up. On the top part, there's two other slots that look like air vents to me. Means that if you turn that motor on, you feel those. One of them you should feel air blowing out of. That means the other one's the intake. This is the exhaust on that chamber cooling that motor. That means that you have a separate chamber. And then, so if you want to cut the vacuum off to let that motor whine at a higher speed and no vacuum is going through that chamber, it's okay because the motor is still being cooled by its own chamber. So want to make sure that those have it. It looked to me like on the reviews and the pictures I've seen, it has that. I looked at the manual that I could find online about the Bauer. That is a Harbor Freight, so sometimes that technical stuff is hard to get a hold of. But the Bauer didn't. The things that I did see and what I saw in the manual look like, all appearances to me, is that it does have its separate motor cooling chamber. So, but you can verify that pretty easily at this point, Stan. I hope this helps you. It was just, I wanted to answer this question. If you own a Bauer, then you want to leave a comment, I'll pass it on to him to let him know for sure if that is the case on them. But I'm pretty sure it is, and he should be able to figure it out with the information he's getting from this video. Anyway, I wanted to talk about that since he had brought that up. I figured maybe it's something that we might all have to think about, because if you're going to be using the shop vac in unusual ways, and it's going to be something like under a load like that, or you shut it off, you want to make sure you're not going to burn that thing up. So you might want to always check that, make sure that those things do have good and separate cooling fans built into them for cooling the motor down separate from the other part. So anyway, now we're getting into rambling. I hope this answers Stan's question. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. I always enjoy reading them, and that's where I learn a lot of things. So just keep leaving them. If you learned something here or you like this video, hit that like button. Lets me know I'm doing something right. Most importantly though, please come back again, because I'm nowhere near done. Thanks, and we'll see you guys again very soon.